Welcome back, Careers in Music class. This is Dan Omer, and
Howdy.
and he's gonna talk to us about his career in the military.
Yeah.
I'm talking about military musicians, and there are so many different facets, and so we are super excited to hear from you. Thanks,
Thank
Dan.
you. I'm very excited to be involved with this. Thank you.
Good. Yeah, this is cool. These students are just, some of them are freshmen, some of them are seniors, and everybody's just trying to figure out what avenues are out there. And there are so many avenues in the military. So start by just telling us what you did in the military.
Yeah. So I'm a horn player, and so I was active duty Air Force for 8 years, 2010 to 2018. And my full-time job in the Air Force was playing the horn. That's what I was hired to do. So in 2010, I won the audition for principal horn of the United States Air Force Heritage of America Band in Virginia, stationed at Langley Air Force Base. And so that was my full-time job. Kind of the broad view of what we would do was, our mission was for it had a number of different angles. Number one, community outreach, kind of classic, what a lot of civilians think of with military bands, right? You go to a 4th of July concert, Veterans Day, something like that, right? Some really patriotic thing, where we play a lot of patriotic music, a lot of American music, but also, kind of classical, hard-hitting, technical stuff as well. And the main purpose of that is just to kind of raise esprit de corps around the country, make people have a positive view of the military, and to help people, kind of love our country more. Another angle we did was a lot of kind of military support, protocol support, and so we'd play for retirements and changes of commands, and sometimes for funerals. I got to play at Arlington for one day. We went up and helped them out for one day, and I got to play 3 funerals at Arlington. And I also got to play for 2 sitting presidents. President Obama came to our base, and he spoke to the entire base, and we played for him. And then I got to play in the inauguration for President Trump. And so getting to play for 2 presidents was amazing. Both times was just thrilling. And then there's also a major component of playing for kind of esprit de corps within the military, playing for other military members, to kind of help them during the difficulties of serving in the military. So we were on the road. We ended up being on the road. My band was on the road 2 to 3 months out of the year, every year. It was usually, our average tour was like 8 days, and we'd play usually 7 concerts each night in a row, and then have a travel day. And so we ended up being on the road a lot. Some tours were shorter, some were quite a bit longer. Every once in a while, in one band, they would have a need. They'd be down a horn player, they just retired and they haven't gotten their replacement yet, or someone would be at some kind of training or on vacation or something. And so they'd ask other horn players across the band system to come and help them out. And so I got to travel a couple of different times and play at TMEA one year. Another year I got to go out and play in some joint concerts with the San Francisco Symphony. And so overall I ended up playing in, I think, 22 or 23 states over the course of my 8 years. And then kind of on the day-to-day level, most days are rehearsals. That's the bulk of what we do. We kind of flip-flop. Like, it was generally every other tour. We'd alternate either being concert band or being in a chamber group. And so everyone was assigned to a chamber group, so when it would break down out of the concert band, there would be a jazz band, a brass quintet that sometimes would be a large brass ensemble, a wind quintet, a clarinet quartet. There was a Dixieland group for a little while. There was a Highland Pipes group for a little while.
Cool.
And then there were also 2 full-time rock bands. They were always just rock bands. That was all they did. They were really focused on recruiting. So for those of you who play something that would be in a rock band, one of those instruments, or vocalists, rock bands are a huge deal in the military band system.
Good to know.
They're very active and they're really good. There was one that was kind of more classic rock, and then the other one that was like top 100, and a new chart would drop and they'd have it transcribed within like 12 hours and they'd be out playing it, that kind of stuff.
Cool.
They were amazing. And so during the chamber tours, I'll talk more about that a little bit later about what that kind of felt like. But anyway, so we kind of alternate tours: concert band, chamber group, blah 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 blah. But whatever group we were getting ready to tour with next, most of our day would be in rehearsals, personal practice, score preparation, that kind of stuff. We do also have kind of extra jobs because the units through almost all of the military bands are self-sustaining, self-supporting units. And so that means that we book our own gigs. Oh. We maintain our own library of music, sheet music, or digital files. We have our own supply shelves of instruments, accessories, whatever, oil and grease and reeds and swabs and all that kind of stuff. We kind of do a lot of our own tech support as well for the computers that you just need to use in the day-to-day. There's kind of an admin side that just kind of deals with some paperwork, just making sure the unit is running smoothly.
And so everybody in the band has their own kind of specific task to kind of be an admin.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah, exactly. So everyone kind of has their side job.
Gotcha.
Just to help the unit run.
Makes sense.
And so I kind of took turns being in, I was an admin for a while, and then I was in marketing for a little while. I used Photoshop, learned how to use Photoshop a little bit. And I helped to, when our other people in ops would book the gigs, and then I would kind of do a lot of advertising in the local areas to try and fill the seats as much as possible. Then I was in the music library at the end before I left, and so everything is just kind of geared towards making our unit as successful as possible.
Cool.
So you'll have some of those additional duties kind of rolled into your job. And sometimes it'll be, depending on the season, a little bit more intensive, sometimes not very intensive at all. So there is that side of it as well that's a little bit of kind of office work. But I kind of came to appreciate that because I think that there's a lot of feeling that we get of, if I just sit in the practice room and practice enough, that's going to get me a job. And then when I get the job, all I have to do is just continue sitting in a practice room and then go out on stage and I perform to all these adoring fans and I make my millions, right? And there it is, there's my career path. And so one of the questions that you asked me to prepare was the job what I expected it to be? And on the one hand, yes. And I'll get more in just a minute into how I found out about the job, the research I did before winning the audition. But when I got in, I thought, okay, it's a military band. We're going to be in uniform. We're going to play for civilians. We're going to play a lot of patriotic music. It's a concert band. It's not an orchestra. There's no strings, right? So, certain things that I anticipated we were going to be doing. But I kind of had a sense that there were these additional duties to do. But I didn't know a lot about it. And then once I got there, I was like, hey, wait a second. I have to sit at a desk, that's dumb. I thought I'd just sit in the practice room or in the rehearsal hall, and that's all there is to it. Come on. And so it was a little bit surprising to me at first, and it took me a couple years to kind of wrap my head around coming to terms with it. But one of the lessons that I feel like I really took away from that was a deeper appreciation for what it takes logistically to make music happen.
Super important.
Yeah, you can't, it's not just this ephemeral thing of just the think method from the Music Man or something. If you just feel it and think it, then it just is going to happen. There's so many moving parts that go into making a concert happen, not just for military bands, for any organization. You have to have funding, you have to have sponsors, you have to advertise, You have to have the paperwork. You have to, you have to have all the equipment behind it, which means like moving trucks and, like stands and then who gets the sheet music and the librarians, and, right? All this stuff. There's so many logistics that go into me showing up at rehearsal, sitting down and just playing something, right?
Yeah.
More than just me sitting in a practice room preparing, right? There's so much that goes into it. And if those things aren't taken care of well, then when I show up to do my job of playing the horn, then I'm not as supported. I don't have as many people to play to, and we may run out of funding. And so then I don't get to play my horn, right? So there's so much structural support that goes on. And another kind of ancillary job that I had was stage crew. Not stage crew, I can't remember. Loading crew is what we call it. And so basically showing up earlier than the performance to help set up the stage, run cabling for the mics, put stands and chairs and music out and all this kind of stuff. Take things off the truck, put them back, and then after the concert, strike the set, put it all back on the truck. And again, I will admit I chafed at that for a while. But by the end of those 8 years, I realized, oh my gosh, like this is critical. If someone's not doing that, nothing happens.
Yeah, and a symphony like the Utah Symphony may have people specifically hired to do some of those jobs, right? All of those jobs, actually, your stage crew. But so crucial for a musician to be actively involved in knowing exactly what goes behind it. I think that's so cool that you had that experience to be doing all of that stuff. Yeah,
to kind of open my mind, and not only to see it happening, because now when I go to a gig, like, I see the stage crew guys. Every time they walk past, every time they're moving stuff around, and if they're busy, I won't bother them. But if they're kind of having a slow moment, I'll just say thanks for your support.
Yeah.
And I'll make sure I point them out and say, you guys are awesome. We couldn't do it without you. Because they're always running stuff. They're always doing stuff that affects me, right? That makes my job either easier, or if you make them mad, then they can make your job a lot harder.
Well, we don't want to do that.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want to do that. You want to be friends with all these other people in the organization, because what they do is just as important as what I do. And so that's the other part. It's not just seeing it, but having that sympathy of understanding that I'm just one part in this machine that's rolling on. And
I'm loving just hearing that, it's such a variety. Not only just that you had to do some of the office type work, but also that there was chamber and large ensemble stuff. So you got to probably do quite a variety of music, and that's really neat.
Yes, that was one of the other questions you had asked was, do we have control over our programming, what music we played? And it was like half and half. Basically, for concert band, ceremonial band stuff, we didn't really affect program at all. Every once in a while, the conductor / commander would kind of canvass people and say, hey, what's your favorite something, right? And so we'd get to offer some advice on programming every once in a while. Sometimes, it's kind of a military band tradition that goes back to Sousa of featuring a soloist on programs. And so almost every concert band tour we went on, someone was a featured soloist.
Cool.
And so I got to solo 3 times with the band over the years. And so at those points, they'd say, hey, we're looking for a soloist for this tour. Who wants to do something? Offer some repertoire. And so, you kind of put your name in the hat. And so then you get to kind of choose a piece, or, offer 3 pieces and they'll choose one kind of thing. So you get to affect concert band repertoire a little bit. Usually not ceremonial band, because it's very strict protocol kind of stuff. But chamber music, that's where the other 50%, where we have a ton of say about what goes on in chamber music. Because generally for the chamber music tours, the commander is not directly involved. He doesn't come on the tour with us. He's not conducting us. And so each chamber group has 2 important leaders. One is the NCOIC, the non-commissioned officer in charge. And they kind of help just run logistics. They're usually the highest ranking or one of the highest ranking people in the group. They've been around, they just know the system, the logistics, and the people. And so just to make sure, they're kind of the chain of command on the military side of things. Then you'll have a music director, which is kind of the chain of command for the music side of things. They make the musical decisions, they have the final say on programming, they usually run rehearsals. They'll usually MC at concerts, spend most of the time at the mic. But because it's such a small group, most good music directors and NCOICs will canvass the group and say, what do you guys want to play? What's one of your favorite pieces? You know, and so people say, oh, I've never played, you know, the Kinder Circus before or whatever, you know, awesome, we'll put that on the program and stuff. And so we have a lot of say over what we get to play in the chamber groups, which was so satisfying. Oh my gosh. In a lot of ways, that ended up kind of being like the heart of the job, because we get to choose our programming most of the time, and you're just in a rehearsal space with just a handful of other people. Yeah. Having fun, making music, such a small footprint, and so it's so intimate. Everything that you do is such a huge piece of the puzzle. And then when we go out on tours, again, small footprint, right? And so we can just get in there, there's not a lot of loading crew stuff to do, right? And so we can just go up, set your stuff up real quick, play for an audience. During those programs, we usually liked to let everyone have a turn at the microphone, so the audience kind of felt like they got to know us. And then one of the best parts about the job, we didn't always get to do this with concert band, but with the chamber groups, we'd always say, at some point, come up to the stage after and say hi to us.
Nice.
And so we'd finish the concert and then walk out into the audience and just shake hands with people and get to know people, hear stories, and you get to see so many people that have veteran hats on, or they don't, and you find out like, oh, you were in the Navy for 10 years, and ask them about a story and all this kind of stuff, and they feel so validated and so honored, you know, that you'd spend that time. Not because we're great, but I mean, it's just that they were part of this awesome concert, and it's the uniform and what we represent, and that someone in uniform would offer them so much musical enjoyment for the night, and then also go out and talk to them and ask them to share their stories, whether they were a veteran or not, but just to make that connection. Right.
That's so cool. And going back to what you said at the very beginning, it's just that the purpose of these military ensembles is that esprit de corps and that that support. Just, I love that. That seems like you really kind of got into that and enjoyed that part of it. That seems really neat.
I loved that. That was one of the most satisfying parts of the job.
Yeah.
Was getting to play music for more reasons than just me getting to enjoy playing music.
Cool.
Right?
Yeah, I like that.
Which is important, like us taking satisfaction in our job. That's a critical component, I think, of what music is about. Yeah. Is about the creators of the music loving the process and being deeply engaged in that, right? But that's not all there is to the equation. And so the more that you can tie that, your just personal music making, into more layers of meaning, oh my gosh, like it's so satisfying. It's you're accomplishing so much more with your music. And that was another thing I didn't expect before I won the job, was just, I mean, I've always loved America. I feel like I'm a patriot, and I grew up having a lot of family members in the military. I just never expected myself to go into the military because I'm a musician, and I was not trained I wasn't ever instructed or taught about what the military bands had to offer.
Right.
And so, like, I didn't have an image in my mind of like, oh, I can be a professional salaried musician and be in the uniform like that. I mean, I knew that here in Utah there's the 23rd Army Guard Band, right? Okay. But it's a guard band. It's part-time. It's not, you can't make a living off of that, right? That's just a part-time thing. And so as someone who was striving to provide for my family through music, I didn't see a way that the military bands had anything to offer on that level. So So once I did come around to learning that, like, oh, they're active duty bands, they're full-time, they pay really well, the benefits are amazing, and you're a full-time musician, that was fascinating to me. And so once I got in, I realized, like, I can make music for myself, and I can just enjoy the process of making music with people around me. But I can also bring patriotism to the people around me, and I can also honor the history of the military in our country, the heroes that are sacrificing so much today to keep our country free, and to just bring that sense of patriotism back to those veterans as well as to civilians who wouldn't normally experience that kind of thing.
So neat. Well, I know everybody in the class is wondering, do you have to do boot camp?
Yes.
And do you have to do push-ups? And, like, what is the deal with that?
Yes.
Because obviously it's an audition. Like you said, these are professional level, full-time ensembles. So there's that professional audition you have to take. But tell us about what's the other stuff you have to do.
Okay, yeah, that's a great question. And something that I did not understand a lot about. So, boy, where to start on this one? And I've answered all this, but, like, there's so much to talk about. Okay, so, you know what, let me start with talking about something really important.
Okay.
And then I will answer that question.
Okay.
That's a critical question. But let me start with just kind of breaking down the structure of the military band system. Because this is something I did not understand. And anyway, so there's basically two realms within the military band system. The first one we'll call the premier band system. Okay, the premier bands exist across all branches of the military. Quick little trivia: the Coast Guard is not technically a branch of the military. We honor it as such, and that's fine, but they fall under a different part of the government. But they're not technically military. But that's a whole other conversation. But we'll call them one of the 5 branches. So Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force, Coast Guard, all 5 of them have at least one premier band. The only Coast Guard band that's active duty is the Coast Guard Academy Band in New London, Connecticut. They're amazing. That's one of the best gigs in the military band system. But then the other premier bands are going to be, for the Army, Navy, and Marines, are going to mostly be in Washington, D.C. And then at a few academies. The Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland, West Point for the Army in New York, and then the Coast Guard Academy Band. And then every branch has a full-time premier band in D.C. Those are all permanent assignments. Once you win an audition for those, they'll never reassign you to another band. You're there for as long as you stay in. The other component of what we'll call the premier band system is the entire Air Force Band system, active duty Air Force Band system. Okay. For the Army, Navy, Marines, and that's all there is to the Coast Guard, so we won't really talk about them much anymore. For the Army, Navy, and Marines, they really only have 1 or 2 premier bands each. Again, DC and some academies. The Air Force Band system is the same as those, with just a couple of differences. They're the same in terms of all of them audition at the highest possible level. So, like, if you're auditioning for one of those premier bands, you need to be prepared to audition on the level of the Utah Symphony, the Dallas Symphony, that kind of stuff. That's the level that they operate on. The Air Force Band system has more than 1 or 2 bands on this level.
Gotcha.
Every active duty Air Force band plays on the same level as a premier band. But there are many, I think, well, depending on, I won't get into the details now, but there's like basically a dozen and a half, or whatever, like 9-ish, depending on how you cut it. There's like 9-ish Air Force bands across the country. Those bands in the Air Force band system, you can be reassigned to other bands over the course of your career. It's not super fast moving, like every 2 years you're moving, unless you want to be. You can try and jimmy rig that, but I spent all 8 of my years at Langley Air Force Base. I could have taken an opportunity to move to another band, but I didn't. It didn't make sense for us at the time. But the longer you stay in, you'll probably be reassigned a couple of times. So other than the Air Force bands not being a permanent assignment, in all other ways they're the exact same as the premier bands.
Gotcha.
Effectively. There are some little differences, but it's not worth talking about. So you need to prepare for it the same way. They operate on the same level. All of those premier bands are active duty military.
Okay.
And you're full-time musicians. That is your, whatever, each branch has its own acronyms, but that's your MOS, that's your AFSC, that's your code. That's what you are coded to do, is your instrument. And then, you'll have the ancillary things on the side, like the additional duties we were talking about before. Those bands sometimes will deploy, but only as musicians. And so, and you don't have to deploy if you don't want to. Anyway.
Gotcha.
But they will deploy, and usually the groups that deploy are more of the pop and rock kind of groups. And so, if you play bassoon, you're probably not going to deploy. Unless you go out of your way to learn an extra instrument, or to sing or something, whatever. But if you play guitar, keyboard, if you're an audio engineer, vocalist, things like that, then there's a pretty good chance that at some point you're going to be asked to deploy, or you could have the opportunity for it. But when you do deploy, they're shorter deployments than most deployments for the rest of the military, and you only deploy as a musician.
Cool.
You don't go to do guard duty or be on convoys or anything. All you do is play music at those forward operating bases, for embassies, for a lot of civilian outreach at those places around the FOBs and all this kind of stuff. So you're always a musician when you deploy.
So what's the second group?
So that's the premier group.
Yeah.
Right? And again, Air Force is the entire active duty Air Force system. Gotcha. Is there. The other branches just have 1 or 2.
Sure.
Okay, the next tier down is what we will call the regional band system.
Regional band system.
Okay. What we are calling the regional band system is also active duty, but you're not a musician first. And in this regional band system, there's no Air Force bands, because all the Air Force bands exist in the premier band world, in that realm. So in what we're calling the regional band system, it's only Army, Navy, and Marines. So in that system, you're a soldier, sailor, or rifleman first. And then you have the MOS, or the coded designation of being a musician, but that's secondary to just being a soldier, sailor, or rifleman. And so what that means is you'll get to play music, but not all the time. And when other things come up, music might get bumped out, and you'll have to do other things for base support, for a lot of training, all that kind of stuff. So you're kind of a member of the military first, and then a musician next.
Gotcha. Now it's still a full-time job.
Yes.
Okay.
And so this is where it gets a little bit confusing, is that when you see ads for, like, the Army band system, you just want to be really careful to know what you're looking at.
Yes.
If it's just kind of a general ad for the Army bands or the Navy bands or something like that, that's most likely the regional band situation. It can be confusing because it's still full-time. So you're active duty. You still get the same salary as the premier band people do, because it's just active duty military, right? You're still getting all the benefits, packages, and all that kind of stuff because you're active duty. But your job is going to be that regional band musician realm.
Gotcha.
Right.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. So it's good to know the two kind of separate categories.
Yes. So to get around to answering your question about basic training, to get into the regional band systems for the Army, Navy, and Marines, you do have to pass an audition. However, and I don't mean this as a slight, their overall standards are lower. That doesn't mean that there are not good people there. Like I went to my roommate at the Chautauqua Music Festival went into the Navy regional band system. He was amazing. He was a beast. So I mean, and we collaborated a lot with other of those kinds of bands. There's an Army band at Fort Eustis that was just like 30 minutes from our base. We did joint concerts with them multiple times a year. Most of them were really great players, but the overall standards are a little bit lower musically. When you go in to the regional band system, you usually have some auditions first to see where you're at musically, and to know if there's a position open for it, for your instrument at that time. But you basically enter the system first. You talk to a recruiter, you go through MEPS, you go to basic training, and then you go to the School of Music in Virginia that is for the Army, Navy, and Marines, and you have follow-on training, and at the end of that training, then you have a final audition, and they place you. But at any point along the way, after you've been accessed into the system, if you prove that you're not good enough for the system, and you can't pass that final audition, then they might not place you in a band, but you're already in the system. So they'll find a job for you somewhere.
That's right.
But it just may not be the band. So for the regional band system, it's a little bit the opposite of how to get into the premier band system, right? Because you basically get into the military first, and then you secure your place as a musician, right? Okay, so for the premier band systems, for all the branches, they'll almost always advertise at musical chairs or the International Musician or whatever for a specific position that they're filling. And so getting into the premier bands starts in a way that looks much more like getting into an orchestra. You see an ad, you apply for it, sometimes they'll ask for a pre-screening CD, and then they send you the audition list, you prepare the list, you don't take the audition, right? Quick caveat, while I was in, they changed this a little bit. So like 5 or 6 years ago, they made it so that in your application, you have to send in a full-length photo of yourself, and you have to go and talk to a recruiter first, just for like a really basic pre-screen, just to make sure that you're not like grossly overweight, or that you don't have like the kinds of medical problems or mental health issues or that kind of thing. Not that that makes you a terrible person.
Just might be prohibited in the military.
But it's just logistically getting into the military, they have all kinds of weird things that will disqualify people. And again, that doesn't mean you're a lesser musician or you don't deserve to be in music or anything. It doesn't mean that at all. It's not reflective of you. It's reflective of the military being not just picky, but like sometimes weird about like if you ever sleepwalked after the age of 9 or something, then like they'll just disqualify you.
It's bizarre. Yeah,
so like there's a lot of just weird things like that where it's kind of like they have their own whatever that they're looking at for, if people can be in the military. Being in the band, you can get waivers for all kinds of stuff. My eyesight was horrific, so I had to get a vision waiver, because otherwise I would have been disqualified, so I had to get a waiver for that. So there's all kinds of little things. So when you're applying for a job, quite often now, they'll have you contact a recruiter and just go through a very simple pre-screening and send that in with your application package.
Okay.
So it's nothing to be afraid of. It's just something to know that, like, okay, it's just one little extra hoop to jump through.
Gotcha.
But that being said, basically, for the premier band systems, you get into it the same way as you would like an orchestra. You apply, maybe send in a CD, blah, blah, blah. You prepare the excerpts, you show up to the audition, you play the audition. At the end of the audition, when you win the audition, what they do is they'll give you a form that guarantees your position at that band as a bandsman. So then, so at that point, you've already gotten into the band. Now you need to just go get into the military.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
So it's just backwards.
Yeah, so it's just backwards.
Okay.
So you take that form to your local recruiter. Most local recruiters don't trust local recruiters on anything, ever.
Oh, jeez.
Because they have one job, and that's to get people
in.
That's it. So, not that all of them are unscrupulous. Okay. And besides that, most of them have no idea what the bands are about. It's such a bizarre,
it's a little unique
career field
spot
within the huge military system. Most recruiters have no idea what's going on. My recruiter here in Salt Lake City, when I showed her my guaranteed position as the form for that, she was like, what is this thing? I didn't even know this military form existed. So you have to kind of step them through it and just be patient and take everything with a smile and don't get offended. So then you take that to your recruiter, and then they help you. You have to take the ASVAB, which is kind of like I don't even know what it stands for. It's basically just kind of a cognitive test, or like think of it like an SAT.
Okay.
It's like an SAT test for the military. It's not super difficult, and then you just kind of have to go through the logistics of MEPS, which is just clearing everything and setting everything up to go to basic training, and then on to your job. So every military bandsman has to go to basic training. Okay. There you go. There's your soundbite. Everyone has to go to basic training. The only exception to that is the President's Own Marine Band in D.C. They are this really unique thing where they are not military musicians. They are civilians hired to wear the uniform.
Weird.
So they don't go to basic training. They do go to, I think, like 2 or 3 weeks or something of like logistics training to just learn like customs and courtesies and how to salute properly and how to wear the uniform and ranks and all this kind of stuff, right? But they're technically civilians who wear the uniform.
Cool.
But they're the only band that's that way. Every other military bandsman, premier and regional, go to basic training.
Neat.
Yeah. So, and then after that, then everyone except for the Air Force has follow-on musical training. But for the Air Force, you finish basic training, you go to your station. I was on a tour with the Wind Quintet 9 days after I showed up on base.
Cool.
So, yeah.
Get to work.
Yeah, it was like...
So neat.
Not messing around.
And I love your experience here is with the bands. And you've talked a little bit about the rock bands, though, and there's some other things. And I know that there are also military choirs.
Yes, just a couple.
Just a couple. Okay. Any resources you have for the students about other things, not just band? We'd love to hear.
So still music related? Because,
yes.
The military obviously is huge. There's like hundreds of jobs available in all the branches of the military. But just in music, this is one of the other things I was going to say. Age requirements for getting in.
Oh, yeah.
This is subject to change. They change this every so often. But right now, for the Air Force and the Navy, you have to enter basic training before you turn 40. And for all the other branches, you have to enter basic training before you turn 35. Technically, it's like 28, but for the band, you can get waivers up to those ages to enter the band system. So other opportunities within the military band system. Okay. Let me answer it by talking about another kind of realm of dichotomy. Okay. There's the officer world and there's the enlisted world.
Okay.
Generally speaking, the only officers that exist within the military band system are the conductors. That's it. So like Craig Jessup, right, spent most of his career in the Air Force Band system. He was a conductor of the Air Force Bands. He retired before I did, but I met two people who were stationed with him, who worked under him, and they loved him to death. So Craig Jessup was an officer. The way that the military band system is a clashing of worlds. There's like the military, which is very up and down, very rigid, ranks and chains of command and all this kind of stuff, like kind of shut up and color kind of idea, right?
Yeah.
And then on the other hand, you have the music world that most of us are far more familiar with and trained in, where it's a lot more kind of side to side. You're equal to the people around you. Everyone's contributing something. Yeah, there's roles within sections or whatever, but I mean, like, music is much more this way,
Totally.
and the military is this way.
Totally.
So just know that going in, if you go into the military, that sometimes you have to play this ball this way, and sometimes you have to play ball this way. You just understand that. I chafed against that for a long time, and a lot of us did. We had to kind of figure that out. But once you figure that out, things make a lot more sense about how the logistics and things work in the military bands. So, excuse me. Part of that structure, then, the military side of the structure, is the military has to look at everything through the eyes of what rank are you,
Gotcha.
right? And there are these two worlds of officer or commissioned to be an officer, or enlisted, right? Non-commissioned. The way that the military has always had it for hundreds of years is that they just need fewer officers than enlisted, and so the way that they've rarefied that into the band system is that the only officers are the conductors and the commanders of the organization, right? So they run a lot of the logistics. We joke that sometimes in the Air Force you fly a desk, right? So that's what the commanders largely do, because they're just helping the unit to run. Because according to this side, the military side of things, they're an officer, right? Mm-hmm. But then musically, they're the conductor. Yeah. So they're the commander and the conductor. For basically anything else you're going to do in the military band system, you're going to be enlisted. Cool. And there's no options, there's no opting in or out, there's nothing you can do about it. It's been this way for hundreds of years. You're going to be enlisted. In the general military, the more education you have or skills or leadership or that kind of thing, then you can commission and do that in your field, and you largely do a lot of the same thing, but you just go more the leadership, logistical sides of things. But you can't do that in the band. You have to stay enlisted. If that's your code, is to play horn or sing or be an audio engineer or whatever, you have to be enlisted. So what that means is the military band, within the military bands, we have way, way, way more education in the enlisted structure than any other career field in the military, period.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
By leaps and bounds.
Yeah.
In the Air Force, it was like 90% of us had a bachelor's degree. And like 45% of us had a master's degree. And doctorates were not uncommon. People who had doctorates or were finishing doctorates. So before I got in, I had a bachelor's in horn performance from BYU. And then while I was in, I used one of the benefits of tuition assistance to get an online master's degree in music education from Liberty University.
Cool.
And there are a lot of people who did that, used the tuition assistance, great benefit. Yeah. So all these other opportunities that exist are going to exist within the enlisted structure. All these instruments, mostly oriented around band, but then you also do have a couple of organizations that have strings. Mm-hmm. The Army has the strolling strings in DC, and the Air Force actually even has some strings in DC. All the strings are in DC. They're other than bass, right? Because that's part of a concert band, and then obviously for rock those strings, but that's generally different. For more classical strings, it only really exists in DC.
Well, and you mentioned audio engineers as well. I'm sure they have jobs for that.
Yes.
And other production-related music jobs.
Yes, every band has multiple audio engineers. Their audition process is very different than, kind of the orchestral audition for a trumpet player or something, right? The audio engineer audition process is more about interviews and getting to know people and coming on and like demonstrating how you mix a concert live, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, audio engineers, tons of audio engineers. Every band has multiple engineers. There are also positions for composers.
Nice.
Yeah, which is super cool. Not a lot of positions, but they do exist, and those are super fun to be a full-time composer. Sometimes they'll be called a staff arranger.
Nice.
And then in some of the DC bands, they'll also have like people who are brought on to be full-time active duty military or to be civilians who come in and help the group for logistics. So like
Cool.
music librarians and operations people. So if you have interest in doing that kind of stuff, there are also some of those opportunities in the military as well.
Nice.
And then choirs, that was the other thing. Choirs only really exist. Choirs only exist in a couple of the DC bands. Like Craig Jessup conducted the singing sergeants for a long time for the Air Force in Washington, D.C. But almost every band has vocalists.
So even if it's not a choir, there are vocal positions.
Yeah. And they tend to be more pop, rock, Broadway kind of stuff. But, so it's not like, you're not going to be singing the Queen of the Night, are you? But, for your job anyway. But those positions do exist, and the vocalists are rock stars. I mean, like, it's amazing what they get to do. Yeah, they're really good. So vocalists have opportunities as well. But so yeah, there's that kind of difference between the officer and the enlisted.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
In our last few minutes here, do you have any other just anything from you personally, like tips about what it means to pursue a career in music, or maybe you can even take a moment to, yes, I figured you would. We hope you will. But also maybe just real briefly, you are not currently in the military. You served
Correct.
8 years, so if you just want to quickly touch on, I think a lot of people wonder, like, what's the commitment? Do you have to stay in the military once you're in? And there's certain things, like you said you used the tuition credit, which is an awesome perk of being in the military.
It's amazing.
Like, but are there some certain time requirements, service requirements?
Yeah, so you'll commit yourself to an enlistment period. That's usually somewhere between 3 and 6 years, depending on the situation. So once you commit to that enlistment, as a general rule, you're committed to that time period.
Stick it out.
There are very few ways to get out of that. Don't plan on being able to get out of it. So once you commit to that, then you're in for that period. But then once that enlistment finishes, and for officers, there are similar commitments. They don't call them enlistments because they're not enlisted, blah, 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 blah. But officers go through similar periods of they're going to commit the next 2 to 4 years or something.
Yeah.
When it gets to the end of that enlistment period, then you can make the decision whether you're going to re-enlist or not. And there's a window of time to do that. For staying in for a long period of time, you do need to plan on climbing the rank structure at least a little bit. There are restrictions for how long you can stay in the military at any given rank.
Oh.
And so generally, if you get up to E6 as in the enlisted structure, if you get up to the 6th ranking in the enlisted force structure, each branch calls that a different thing, but if you get up to E6, then you can stay to retirement to 20 years. If you're at E3, 4, or 5, it depends on a lot of stuff if you can stay. Sometimes they drop it down to, this is another thing subject to change. If you get to E5, sometimes that'll let you get to 20 years and retire, sometimes not, depending on the branch, depending on how they change the rules. But so you will need to be prepared, in a lot of cases, to climb the rank structure a little bit. and play that, the up and down game just a little bit. It's not the end of the world. I told this to a lot of people who are coming into the band system. Like, just know what it is. Just don't be afraid to ask questions. Find someone who knows what they're talking about. And, like, feel free to honestly... So I told Seretta this. I'm going to give a lot of links for contacts, right?
Yes.
On those web pages, you may see email, some rank, and a person's name, right? Just email people.
Yeah.
Like, if their name is up on the website for a contact point, contact them.
Yeah.
And just say, hey, this is what I do. I'm an audio engineer. I'm interested in the military band system. Could you please connect me with someone? I'm very interested in learning more about your field. And they, more often than not, will be more than happy to connect you with someone and so that you can ask questions and learn about the career field. But so, yeah, there may be some... You have to climb the ladder a little bit.
I see.
For the rank structure. But there are a lot of benefits with the military band system.
Yeah.
Like, if you just look at the salary, it may not be super impressive, just looking at the amount of money that it makes sometimes. But that's like just the sheer money that you're getting. Being active duty military, you get a non-taxable basic allowance for housing. You get a non-taxable basic allowance for clothing. And then, like, the benefit package is one of the best in the country. Like, it's complete medical.
Wow.
I never paid a dime for anything medical related. And that even includes a lot of, like, elective stuff. I got PRK, so I got my eyes fixed. It's like LASIK. Did that for free. Got lots of physical therapy and chiropractic work for free. They have mental health services, marital counseling, dental. I got an MRI once when I didn't even really need it, but they had it and they said, we could give you an MRI. Okay, fine. Like, I mean, it's the medical and the dental especially is amazing. But like all the medical stuff is completely free.
And the housing allowance, that one kind of blows my mind. Because if you think
nice.
about the fact that you're not, that salary that you see doesn't need to include you trying to find a place to
Pay
live.
for a house.
That's huge.
Yeah,
So
that's gigantic.
That's major.
Yeah, so taking all of that into consideration, not to mention all the other ancillary benefits that you don't have to use but are available to you. You live on a base that has like all this stuff. You have gyms that are open all the time. You have legal counsel that's available to you for anything. Cool. Tax help. What were some of the other things that I put down? Oh, like education benefits. So I did the tuition assistance to get a master's degree.
Awesome.
For, almost for free. It didn't pay for all of it, but I mean, I ended up paying like $2,000 for a master's degree.
Oh my gosh.
And then that's not even counting the GI Bill that you get after you leave the military. The GI, you can use it while you're in as well, but if you use it after you get out, you get paid to go to school. I could go get a doctorate at the U right now and be paid almost like $15,000 a year. Like, paid. Like, they cover everything, tuition, books, and everything. And I get paid a basic housing allowance on top of it. Like, it's nuts. The GI Bill is amazing.
That's wonderful.
So there's all kinds of benefits like that. Not to mention when you have your military ID, you can take that to a lot of places around town, get discounts at restaurants and stores and, all kinds of things. So, I mean, all that stuff really adds up. And so if you just look at the base salary, like, could I provide for a family on this? I don't know. But when you really roll all of that in, and the health benefits, almost all of them, it doesn't always cover all of dental, and sometimes not all of vision. But everything else covers all of your dependents. Cool. Your spouse, your kids. And so, like, for that kind of stuff, we had 2 babies while we were in. We didn't pay a dime. They were both C-sections. They were difficult. Wow. Like, there was a lot of help we needed for them. We didn't pay a dime.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
It's tens of thousands of dollars right there.
I know. Yeah. So you start adding all that up, and you're like, oh, yeah, this pays really well.
Yeah.
My wife, while I was active duty, my wife stayed at home. Both of us wanted her to stay home and be a full-time mom and homemaker, and we could afford to do that. I mean, we weren't like rolling in it. We weren't like Scrooge McDuck, but I mean, we were comfortable.
Nice.
And if you're smart with your money, don't go being dumb with stuff and getting into debt. But I mean, if you're smart with your money, it pays a lot. It's very comfortable. You can easily raise a family. There were a few other members of the church that were in the military band system that I interacted with, like Daniel Thrower.
Yeah.
Remember Daniel Thrower?
Yeah, I do.
Anyway, so and they've got 6 kids.
Yeah.
All right, something like that. So, anyway, you can provide for a family.
That's so great.
Yeah. So any just kind of, I know we're at the end here.
That's okay. Yeah. Any last minute tips, advice you'd have for all of these wonderful music students?
Okay. A couple of thoughts real quick.
Okay.
I know I'm an Omer. I tend to talk a lot, but I'll try and keep this really short. Don't expect your career to look exactly like anyone else's.
Oh.
Don't get stuck in that trap of thinking like, that's how they do it, or that's the system, or if I follow these steps, I'll have a career that's exactly the same as someone else's. Don't get fooled into thinking that. You have to be more flexible than that. And more than being flexible, you have to be willing to be yourself and to make up your own mind about what you want to do. Because even if, okay, you look at like Larry Lowe, horn professor at BYU, right? He's had an amazing career. Even if I said, okay, hey, I want to be a university professor like Larry, maybe that end goal might look the same, but man, all the little things that go into getting to that point, I can't expect myself to look exactly the same at every little turn, every little connection I make, every audition I take, every freelance gig that I go after. You know what I mean? Like, no, that's not going to fly. Mm-mm. There's no way that you can know every little detail of what made someone's career. There's no way you can know that. So don't even try. Like, if you want to go for a couple of big things that, like, I want to be, the concert master of the Pittsburgh Symphony or something. Cool. Great. But, man, that answers so few questions about where you are right now and where you are when you're concert master. Yeah. There's so many. Oh, my gosh. Like, that's where your career is made. Mm-hmm. To finally end up in some specific chair or position or whatever is great. But, man, that's like a symptom, kind of. That's like an after effect.
Interesting.
Of all the other things that you have to do in the meantime to build your career. Deciding how to, like, this is something I wish I would have known way earlier in my career, was networking. Get to know people. Oh my goodness. I don't know why. I think it's part of that mentality of, if I just sit in my practice room, work really hard, I'll end up in a great job, right? Because it's like, what's connecting the dots between me today and someday being concertmaster of the Pittsburgh Symphony, right? Like, if that happens, it happens, whatever. But like, it's all those little decisions that you make in the meantime. It's the people that you get to know. Mm-hmm. It's the people that you go to lunch with, or you hang out with after the concert, or that you email with, or ask to be a mentor, or take lessons from, or something. Like, don't be ashamed, don't be self-conscious, don't be embarrassed, and don't feel like you're compromising your morals to aggressively network with people. You're not a sellout to do that.
No, people are people.
Yeah, people want to work with the people that they know.
Yes.
Same with us, right? I mean, I'm the same way, you're the same way. All of us are that way. Yeah. You want to work with the people that you know, that you have some experience with. Yeah. Or that it can be recommended from someone that you trust, right? I mean, that's how you network.
Yeah.
You can't just sit in your practice room and expect people to get to know you. Mm-hmm. You have to learn how to network for the sake of networking. Mm-hmm. And then tie that into your brand, tie that into your person, tie that into your goals, all this kind of stuff. Great. But, man, you got to network the crap out of stuff. So, all that to say, don't expect your career to look like someone else's in every little detail. The people who are successful are not the people who wait for opportunities or who even take the opportunities that come up. They're the ones who go and make the opportunities. Those are the people who are successful. You can't sit around and say, well, someone else said if I do this and it's been prescribed to me, that if I follow this path, no. Mm-mm. You sit down, look inside of yourself, examine your opportunities around you, and then look at where you can make things happen. you have to be aggressive. You can't just sit around and wait for things to happen or for other people to be generous or something like
You
that.
have to be proactive.
Yeah.
Everybody, rewind the video for the last 30 seconds and listen to that one more time. I love that you just said you have to examine yourself and then examine what's going on. You make your own career.
Mm-hmm.
That's so, so great.
Because if you live reactively, you'll end up not where you want to be. It may still be okay, but it's not going to be great. Following the path of least resistance makes crooked things of rivers and people. Right. So I would just highly encourage everybody, work like a dog. Don't take anything for granted. Nothing for granted. Even if you're really talented, find a way to come to terms internally with that and then put it to the side and assume that you don't have that talent. I'm serious. And then that talent will be there in your back pocket when you need it, and that will help you give a leg up. But act like you don't have any talent. Act like you have to scrap for every possible advantage. And then, when things work out in your favor, be genuinely grateful for it. Just be so grateful that things worked out. Because we inhabit such a complex career field. There's so much unpredictability and things that we can't control, and the human factor and all this kind of stuff, right? Chances are it's not going to work out. From a certain point of view, there's just so many moving parts.
Yeah.
So if we don't do anything, if we don't work like a dog, nothing's going to happen.
Right.
It's just not. And I think that's why a lot of people drop out of the career field.
That's true.
Is because they don't work hard enough, and so they just never get their own traction. But even when you get your own traction, it's not a guarantee that things are going to work out, right?
That's true.
And so when things do work out in your favor, just be so grateful for it.
It's so
because a lot of people don't get those opportunities.
true. And they have worked just as hard.
And they have.
Yeah, but it's true. Gratitude is huge.
Yeah. I felt that way about every audition I took. The auditions that I lost, I felt like, well, hey, I worked just as hard as the next guy, and I didn't get it.
That's life.
And I'm glad for them. I'm grateful for them that they got a job. That's great, but I didn't get it.
Yeah.
But then when I won that Air Force job, I'm serious. That night, I was just like, how did I win that thing? Like, I worked like a dog for it.
Yeah.
You know, I walked out of the audition even before I heard the results, and I was like, I think I put that one away, you know? But even that being said, I looked at all the other candidates. There are people with like double doctorates and like it's nuts. I just have a bachelor's degree. Like, there are so many qualified people there. And it could have been any one of like a dozen of those people could have done the job. But somehow I got that. Like, that blew my mind. And every day of my job, I'm not even joking, every day of my job, when I drive up to the rehearsal hall, I'd just be like, I can't even believe this. And I'd walk in and I'd listen to the people around me warming up and practicing, and I'd just be like, I can't even believe this. That I'm around these kinds of people and that I get to do this job. Because so many people go for stuff like that and they don't get it. So when things do work out in your favor, work like a dog to get there, and then just be absolutely grateful that you happen to be one of the lucky ones that something great happened to.
Oh, thank you so much, Dan.
Yeah.
I love that we ended on that. I hope everybody takes that to heart, and this was just such a great interview. So thank you so much
Thank
for talking to us.
Thanks, everyone. Good luck.